Now we're going to look at your shoulder girdle, also known as the pectoral girdle. This basically is made up of two clavicles and two scapulae, one on each side, of course, and that provides support for your shoulder. I'm going to switch to the model here so that we can take a closer look. So here is your scapula. It's going to be at the back, right? You can if you rub your upper shoulder, you can sometimes feel a bony structure, and that actually is the spine of your scapula, right? We are looking at the posterior side, the back of your right shoulder over here, and you can see there is a structure that kind of looks like a hook here at the top of your scapula, and that is called the acromion. So the acromion is where it will make a connection with this bone called the clavicle. Right, let me put a label there for you. That's the clavicle. That's your scapula, and the acromion is part of your scapula, right? And you can see that it's going to make a connection with the clavicle. So clavicle is kind of like this S-shaped bone. At the back, connects to the scapula through the acromion, and at the front, it is going to connect to the top of the manubrium. Right? Remember, this is the manubrium of the sternum. Okay, so the scapula and the clavicle makes up your shoulder girdle. Now, if I isolate the scapula here, if I just make it by itself, you can see on the lateral side of the scapula there is an indentation. This indentation is called the glenoid cavity. Glenoid cavity. Okay, that is where the upper limb is going to attach to, right? So if I bring back the limb, then you'll be able to see that the upper limb, the humerus, is going to fit right into the glenoid cavity. So that forms like a ball and socket joint that allows a wide range of motion of your arm, basically. So there is your pectoral girdle, right? Your shoulder girdle. Of course, all these things are going to be stabilized by ligaments and muscles. Ligaments are basically these things that connects bones to bones, right? And they essentially tape the bones together to stabilize the joint. So here we can see the rest of the arm, right? We saw the humerus already, right? That connects with your scapula, and then that makes up your upper arm, and your forearm is going to have two bones, the ulna and the radius. And then you're gonna have various bones in the hand. So let me switch back to the model to show you all these bones. Again, we are looking at the right arm from the front. So this here is the second longest bone in the body. We call that the humerus, or also known as the funny bone. And again, it makes a ball and socket joint here with the scapula. And at the distal end, of the humerus, it will make a connection with your forearm. So there are two connections here, right? The bones that are on the lateral side, that is the radius, and the one that is on the medial side, that is called the ulna. Right? So both of these bones would connect to the distal end of your humerus, but if you rotate it, if I rotate this to the back, you can see that your elbow is actually formed by the ulna. So if you rub your elbow and you feel the bony structure, that's this knob that you're feeling. So this creates a hinge joint, and it allows you to move the forearm basically up or down, right? Up and down. Over here, you can see the two bones, right? The relationship between the ulna and the radius that forms the forearm. So you know, chickens, they also have these bones, and when you eat chicken wings, you're essentially eating this portion of the chicken, right? These two bones are the equivalents of the same bone in the chicken wing. So at the distal end of the forearm, the radius and the ulna, you see that there are some smaller bones here. These bones are what forms a part of your wrist. We call these bones collectively, we call them the carpals. Carpals. Okay, so let me label that for you. So these bones here are called carpals. So the individual carpals, they have names, but we're not gonna really go into too much detail of it. You have a total of 8 carpals. That's what matters for what we're talking about. So these bones would form your wrist, and distal to the carpals, these smaller bones, right? These are what we call metacarpals. Okay, so I'm going to put another label there, metacarpals. And you have 5 of them. Okay, so times 5. Right? And I'm just going to call them metacarpals collectively. And finally, all these other bones, right? These are going to be called the phalanges. And you have a total of 14 phalanges. You have 14 phalanges. So let me just color them for you. These are going to be your carpals. Carpals. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you have more at the back. Label's kind of in the way. There we go. And then another one here. So you have 8 of these in total. You have 5 metacarpals. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 metacarpals, and the rest of them would be phalanges. So in the thumb, you have 2 phalanges, and then the rest of the fingers, you would have 3 each. So 3 times 4 is 12, plus the 2 in the thumb, you would have a total of 14 finger bones, or 14 phalanges. So there is basically your entire arm. So next we're going to talk about the pelvic girdle. Pelvic girdle is basically what forms your hip, right, your hip bones. So I'm going to explain all these in the 3D models. Okay, so that here is the sacrum. The sacrum is basically at the bottom of your backbone. And you know, these are your tailbones, your coccyx bone, but we're going to be talking about the pelvic girdle. So the pelvic girdle has 3 bones. I'm going to label them for you. We have the ilium, right? This one is ilium, not to confuse with the ileum of the small intestine. We have another bone here called the pubis, and there is another one called the ischium. All right, so let me just color them for you, so it becomes easier to explain. So there is the ilium, there is the pubis, and there is the ischium. Maybe use a different color here. There is the ischium. Okay, so the ilium is going to connect to the sacrum at the back, and the pubis will connect with the other pubis at the front. So I cannot get this to show up, but you see there is a gap here. That gap is actually supposed to be filled with a cartilage, and that gives some flexibility to the pelvic girdle. On the lateral side, you can see that the 3 bones actually forms a socket. And this socket is where your leg is gonna connect to, right? To form the another ball and socket joint. Okay, so the pelvic girdle is made up of these three bones, and on each side, we call them the coxal bone, C-O-X-A-L. So a coxal bone is made up of the ilium, pubis, and ischium, and the two coxal bones on both sides makes up your pelvic girdle. Okay, so back to this socket here, right? You can see the socket is made up of three bones. Each kind of contributes about a third to this socket, and this socket has a name. It is called the acetabulum. Acetabulum. Okay, and this is where the head of your femur, your upper thigh, is going to fit into. We'll take a look at that later on. There are a couple other features that you should know. For example, if you are watching this video sitting right now, what you're sitting on is this notch there, and that's part of your ischium, and we have a name for that as well. This is called the ischiotuberosity. Ischiotuberosity. Okay, and that's the part that you are going to be sitting on right now. And you can see there is another hole here. Let me put another label for you. It's hard to point at the hole. I don't think I can do that actually, so I'm just going to point to the edge of that hole, but I'm actually pointing at the hole. Okay, so this this hole is called the obturator. Obturator foramen. Okay, and that actually allows for blood vessels to go through, right, and nerves to go through to your legs, right? So when we are sitting, we're not going to be compressing our blood vessels or veins or nerves, because they all are protected by this this bone structure. Okay, so the obturator foramen is formed by the pubis bone and the ischium, and the acetabulum is formed by all three bones. So there is your pelvic girdle. We will actually label the pelvic girdle together in the course pack. So this is page 69. So here we have the sacrum, right? So this bone is the sacrum. Again, that is the base of your backbone. Right? I'm gonna put the label there for you. This is sacrum. Right, and at the distal end of the sacrum, you have your tailbone. So tailbone is coccyx. All right. So on the side of the sacrum, you have the ilium. Okay, so this whole bone is ilium. Now I'm gonna put a circle here to highlight the acetabulum. Right, and this is the socket. For the femur. Right, the femur is the bone that makes up your the thigh bone, basically. Okay, and this acetabulum will be created by all three of the bones of the pelvic girdle. So I'm just going to color a little bit into it, right? I mean, you can see it much clearer in this model, right? You can see the three bones actually mix it up, but this is a 2D picture, so it's kind of hard to show. At the front here, we have the pubis. Right? The pubis is going to go a little bit into the socket as well, and finally we have the ischium, right, which also forms part of the socket. Right? So let me label it for you. This is ilium, I-L-I-U-M. This is the ischium, and here is the pubis. Okay, so I'll call them 1, 2, and 3. So 1 plus 2 plus 3 creates your coxal bone. Okay, so you have 2 coxal bones, right? One on each side. A couple other things, right? You might remember this hole. Right? This hole, a hole is a foramen. So this is obturator, obturator. Foramen. Sorry, have an extra Y there. Obturator foramen, that's for the blood vessels and nerves to pass through down to the leg. And there's another thing that we talked about earlier in the 3D model, right? This is the ischial tuberosity. Right? That's what you are sitting on now. And what was missing in the 3D model is the little cartilage here in between your ischium, right? In between your pubis, rather, right? So that little bit of cartilage is called the symphysis pubis. Okay, so it just gives a little bit of flexibility to your pelvic girdle. And I forgot to mention, let's go back to this model here. This hole is basically what's restricting how long you can wait before you have to induce a delivery for your baby. Okay, if you let the baby stay in the womb for too long, they might grow very big, and the head of the baby might not fit through this opening, and then you will have to do C-section, right? So if up to certain weeks, if they think the baby is too big, then they will try to induce the baby so that they come out and avoid a C-section. While we are on this page, let's quickly label some of these other things that we talked about as well. So we talked about the sternum, right? Sternum has 3 parts to it. That's 1, 2, and 3. Right. So the first part is manubrium. Right. And then the next part is just called the body, and we have the xiphoid process. So together these three things makes up the sternum. Okay, so manubrium, body, xiphoid process, they make up the sternum. So we have your ribs connecting to the sternum. Let me choose a color here. Let's use pink. Right, so 1, 2, right, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are the true ribs, right? So true ribs, 7 pairs. And they are called true ribs because they connect to the sternum through their own costal cartilage. I'm just going to color some of these cartilage for you. So that's a costal cartilage. You know, sometimes when you eat ribs, the cartilage that you're eating is basically the costal cartilage. Okay, so there it is. Then the next 5, right? Next 5, they are called the false ribs. You can color that yourself. 5 pairs false ribs. 5 pairs of false ribs, 7 pair of true ribs, and the last 2, right? This one and that one, 11 and 12, they are part of your false ribs, but we also call them floating. Okay, floating ribs because they don't have any cartilage, right? And just want to mention here at the manubrium, you can see another notch here, and another notch here. That's going to basically connect with the clavicle, right? The clavicle. right? And the clavicle will connect at the back to your scapula. We did the hand, right? So this is the radius, this is the ulna, and you see some bones here. We call them the carpals, right? Carpals. Carpals. These are like the people who carpool with you, like carpals. Carpals. You have a total of 8, and we have 5 metacarpals, right? 5 metacarpals. You probably have heard of carpal tunnel syndrome, right? And that's, definitely has to do with this region where your median nerve is pinched. And here, all the finger bones, you can see 2 phalanges in the thumb, but 3 for all the other fingers, right? So that makes up a total of 14 phalanges. Okay, so there you have it. These are the labeling for this page.